Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Integrating Wellness into Your Meetings and Incentives. My name is Barbara Scofidio, and I'm the editor of Preview Magazine and will be your moderator. I'm delighted to welcome Melissa Van Dyke, president of the Incentive Research Foundation. Preview has worked hand in hand with the IRF for the past 2 years to create Meet Well, the first ever event focused on integrating wellness into events. The third annual Meet Well will be coming to Park MGM's Stay Well Conference Center in Las Vegas in January of 19. Very excited about that, and stay tuned for more details. Today's webinar has been made possible by Palace Resorts. Palace Resorts and LeBlanc Spa Resorts take pride in delivering all-inclusive meetings at its 10 stunning beachfront locations in Mexico and Jamaica. Meeting incentive, convention, and event groups can enjoy state-of-the-art meeting facilities for 10 to 10,000, top quality food and drink, luxurious spas, stylish accommodations, and 5-star service with no tipping necessary. It's all included in one flat rate with the added bonus of Palace's signature amenity, the wow factor. Before we begin, I do need to do a couple of housekeeping items. During the presentation, feel free to enter your questions in the question box. We will gather them together and hold a Q&A at the end of the presentation. If your questions have not been answered, we will provide the speaker, Melissa, with all the questions, and she will get back to you offline. And don't worry if you missed something, this webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive a link via email to access the recording at your leisure. You'll also receive 1 credit hour toward your CMP from the Events Industry Council, as with all preview webinars. For those of you who attend the entire presentation, and we certainly hope you will, you're eligible for our drawing for a $100 gift card. I will announce the winner at the end of the event. So sit back, get comfortable. The webinar is beginning now. Melissa, take it away.
Thank you, Barbara. Well, as Barbara said, I am Melissa Van Dyke. I am president of the Incentive Research Foundation. And we have actually enjoyed a very long, fruitful relationship with Preview. So we're super happy to be here today talking with you about wellness in events. For those of you who are on the call today, who may not be familiar with who the Incentive Research Foundation is, we are a nonprofit research foundation. We have been around for about 20 years in one form or another, believe it or not. And in the last 10 years alone, we have dedicated over $1 million to research and education on the topic of incentives and motivation and travel, reward and recognition in the workplace. At any given moment, we are producing or are in various stages of completion for about 17 different research projects. And we release 1 new project a month, so I encourage you to go out to the IRF.org and sign up or follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn to get an insight into our information. And I'm very excited about the topic we're going to be covering today, because it was in some conversations with Barbara, I think a few years ago, where we had just released a study, a joint study with Preview on trusted relationships in the industry. And one of the things that we had started talking about were how those trusted relationships bring better ideas and make our meetings better. And one of the ways, one of the partners we were talking about was somebody who really talked about wellness. And we started to think about how truly as planners and as a part of this industry, we sometimes ourselves get run down, right? And then we started to think about overall what that meant to the industry. And that led the way into a study that we did a couple of years ago on wellness in meetings and incentive travel. And it was such a great study because it dealt with a number of things that we had been hearing on the wire a number of trends that we had been tracking in different fronts, which we will be talking today about several of those different trends. But one of the biggest things that it dovetails for us was actually a single indicator that we've been tracking for a few years now, which was when we go out and ask incentive travel and meeting planners, what are you incorporating into your events? How are you innovating them? One of the questions was on wellness. Are you including wellness into your incentive travel programs? And about 38% in our last fall study said, yes, we are. We're doing more of that. So, and we've seen that continuously tracking up over time. So it really dovetailed again on some things that we were seeing in our pulse study. And we wanted to dig a little bit deeper into what was going on. We certainly know as well that the topic of wellness in U.S. organizations specifically is a very, very hot topic for one really big reason, and that is healthcare is one of the biggest costs and one of the biggest benefits that are offered by U.S. organizations. And it's a huge part of their, of course, their P&L and their costs annually. So how we incorporate wellness into the events that we produce for our organizations or for our client organizations is now a big conversation and is only going to get more prevalent as time goes on. So let's talk a little bit about the 38% that we saw initially in our last poll study talking about wellness and saying, yes, we are absolutely increasing it. That conversation continues to grow, and it's prompted a little bit by some of the things that are happening, even in like the World Economic Forum, which has a whole focus on wellness right now. And one of the things I want to point out is wellness and what we do on a daily basis, the creation of meetings and events and face-to-face activities, play a huge role in the wellness in organizations. And the reason I can say that, we do a lot of research in the Incentive Research Foundation into meetings and incentives and incentive travel, but we also look very much into behavior change and what causes people to do a particular behavior, to increase their performance in a certain way, decrease their performance in a certain way. So we're constantly looking at behavioral models, and I will not bore you on this call with all of the different models that we look at. But one really important one comes to mind because it was adopted by the World Economic Forum as the primary model that they're using to support wellness in organizations. And it's a model by B.J. Fogg at Stanford. He's a professor at Stanford. It's called the Fogg model for that reason. And what he found is that he was looking initially at technology, believe it or not, but that behavior itself is a function of three things. For we as humans to produce any behavior, we have to have the motivation to do it, we have to have the ability to do it, and we have to have the trigger that tells us to do it at that exact time. And that sounds very basic, but a great example that he gives, which I'm going to tell you how that maps into meetings here in just a second. So think about the last time that you missed a call. Let's say that you saw who was calling and you looked at the name and you're kind of like, not today, or just not right at this moment. I can't necessarily right at this moment kind of deal with whoever it is who's calling. Maybe I'm too busy. Maybe I just don't have the energy for it. Well, that's because you didn't have the motivation to answer the call. Let's say you didn't answer the call perhaps because you were driving. You shouldn't have been answering the call. You were in the shower. They were closing the doors on the airplane, right? That's because you didn't have the ability to answer the call. But the final element is you might not just have heard it ring. Maybe you had your phone on vibrate like we often do, or you were you didn't have a signal for any reason at the point. The point is that all of that, to answer a phone, you have to have the motivation, the ability, and the trigger. And the same is true, they found, of wellness behaviors. You have to have the motivation to be well, which many individuals in the U.S. and now, of course, abroad as well are starting to partake in. You have to have the ability to engage in those wellness behaviors. And a lot of that has to do with your environment, creating a healthy environment for yourself or for your corporations. And you see that happening, right? You see corporations bringing in more wellness focused areas into the physical space. Perhaps from an ability standpoint, that means you've thrown out all of your junk food or whatever it is that entices you at 7 p.m. in the evening. But you also have to have the trigger. You have to have the thing that tells you at that time to perform the healthy behavior or to not perform the healthy behavior. And a great example of that is, I can tell you my trigger is 7 p.m. every night. I want a sweet, right? It's just like literally, it's like clockwork. And so I have to know that that's my trigger. For people who are engaging in healthy behaviors, what they found is that, and this is why they adopted, the World Economic Forum adopted the FOG model, is that a change in your schedule is one of the biggest indicators that you are going to fall back and engage in unhealthy behaviors. So you often hear that when people go to events, right? You're like, I'm trying to eat healthier, but I'm going to be at a 2-day meeting, so. Or I'm trying to cut back maybe on not having as much, maybe not drinking as much, but you're going to go to a reception for an event. All of those are triggers for us, even if we're focused on engaging in healthy behaviors, to kind of fall away from them. And so it's important for us, if we're really serious about wellness in our organizations and personally, to think about what that means for face-to-face meetings, because face-to-face meetings, to be honest, are a big trigger for why people engage sometimes in unhealthy behaviors. And this is what, again, sent us down the path, and I thank you, Preview, for partnering with us on doing this study on wellness and what it means to organizations and kind of how they're dealing with it. And one of the biggest things that we found is that there is a very strong personal interest for wellness amongst meeting planners. And we went out and we talked to, via the survey, about 100 different planners about this topic. A little bit about those planners. 50% of the planners were corporate meeting planners for Fortune 500 organizations. About half of them as well were third-party planners. So we had a pretty diverse view of both corporate planners as well as third-party incentive house or meeting planning company planners. And we found, first of all, that they were very experienced, the ones who responded. The vast majority of them had more than 5 years experience, and a third of them had more than 10 years experience. And all of them, 90%, almost 90%, as you see here, 89% had a strong personal interest in wellness. So as much as we can talk about it in terms of corporations, the reality is that most of us as meeting planners have a strong personal interest as well. And we did see that those people told us as well they had a strong focus on it in their organizations. 87% of those respondents said that wellness is a critical focus for their organization. And that was fantastic to hear. The problem was we started to really get into implementation around how that looks in organizations. In organizations, the numbers started to decline. So about 70% said that they have a wellness program for their organization or for their client's organization. And great to hear. Number of organizations are increasing their use of wellness programs, specifically as it relates to a reduction in premium costs for individuals. But the numbers really start to decline from there. So more than half said they do apply a little bit more budget to have healthy meetings, but still 45%, although you see this strong personal and corporate interest in wellness, about 45% did not include any additional budget to help those meetings be healthy. Less than half actually connect their meetings to the wellness program that the organization has. And that was a big finding for us, because one of the big takeaways I hope people on this call would find is reach out to your organization and find out what's happening with the corporate wellness plan, because there's not only budget there, but there's a lot of synergies that can happen when you're working with the HR groups within your organization, and supporting their wellness efforts, and they're supporting your meeting planning efforts. Less than half said that they're looking for suppliers to help with healthy meetings, which is kind of a shame. There are a number of really, really great resources out there, and we're going to talk about some of them today to help with healthy meetings. So hopefully, if not even via Google, you'll go out and look for some of those at the end of this call. About 40% said the organization has detailed wellness meeting guidelines. So 60% don't have any guidelines for them or their clients, themselves or their clients, on healthy meetings. So one of our goals today is to really provide you with some guidelines that you can use for all of your meetings based on what we've seen out in the marketplace, as well as what we've seen in some of the other guidelines that exist from partner organizations. And then just a little over a third of our respondents said they strongly agree that, or somewhat agree that they have a policy requiring well meetings. And we'll give you an idea today of where you might find some of those policies or some ideas. But of course, if we're going to really talk about how you integrate wellness into events, there's only so many places you can do that. You can do it in the F&B of the program. You can do it in the activities and design of the program, and in the suppliers that you engage. So we're going to take those things kind of in turn today to give you some ideas about how wellness is being integrated, we found, and then some kind of interesting and fun trends and how that dovetails for what's happening in meetings and events today. All right, so let's look first at our top 4 standard healthy F&B inclusions that we heard from our study. And what you're seeing here are the top 4 options that came from our questionnaire from the 100 meeting planners. So we went out and we asked, and we gave them about 15 different options, and we said, of all of these F&B inclusions, which ones are you including standard? Which ones are you including when you have the option or the budget to do so? And which ones are you not incorporating at all, or very rarely? And these 4 came up as key. All of these came up with 3/4 of respondents saying we include them either standard or when our budgets allow. And the first one was providing water and low-calorie drinks as an option for their attendees. That kind of seems like a no-brainer, but I actually was at a meeting, interestingly enough, in the financial insurance space in the last week, and there really wasn't any opportunity to go just grab a glass of water or a bottle of water, or even a water station anywhere in the conference area. So you would think that was kind of a basic thing, but being mindful of it at all points of where attendees are is really, really important. And when we talk about low-cal drinks, we're talking about drinks that have less than 40 calories per serving, so no sugary juices or high-calorie sodas. So we had about 50% of respondents come back and say standard. They do include water and low-calorie drinks as an option. We had about a little less than 50% say they provide healthy snacks, fruits, vegetables, granola, etc., standard in all of their meetings, which is fantastic. We then had about 40% that said they provide lean meat standard in their offerings. So that could be chicken, fish, prepared in a healthy fashion in their meetings and events. And we had just over a third that said they provide gluten-free options in every one of their events. So these are what we took away as in terms of standard practice right now, where we are as an industry in integrating wellness as the primary things that are happening. The good news for 3 of these 4 options is that we all know that it takes budget to get things done in meetings and events. So we actually didn't just ask people, okay, hey, how are you creating and integrating wellness into your meetings? We asked them which are the most budget-friendly options for wellness, and 3 of these came up as an option. So you see those in the red check boxes: watery and low-calorie drinks, healthy snacks, and lean meat were also 3 of the top budget-friendly options. And I would say that's kind of the trifecta. We want to have well options that we can easily execute and that are budget-friendly. And you see 3 of those here. So I would say baseline, that's what we need to be including in all of our meetings. We'll talk a little bit today about this, but one of the things that came out of our first event was sneaky wellness, where sometimes we have to be a little crafty on how we help our meetings get a little bit more healthy, and offering things and just triggering people to know that they're available and communicating with healthy options can be a big start. And that fits very well with the CSPI food guidelines. And I'm not sure, probably many of you on the call are not familiar with CSPI. It's the Corporation for Science in the Public Interest. And believe it or not, they actually have a whole set of food guidelines and activity guidelines out there that you can refer to. If you're just getting started down this path, it's a great place to start because there's some pretty detailed work that's happened that you can look at on their website. And you can even take a healthy meeting pledge, which means you would go out and say, yes, we want to be a healthy meeting organization, and take the pledge and then install the guidelines in your organization. Many of the things that we saw and tracked in our study fit here. Their top 6 food guidelines were: 1, incorporating fruit and vegetables into every single food opportunity at your event. So that's snacks, that's all meals, all breaks, making sure that you have some fruit and vegetables at each one of those, not just cookies and brownies at breaks, which we all love. The second was controlling portion size, making sure that when you're serving a plated meal that you're serving the proper portion size and not the extended portion size that we sometimes do, and also offering smaller plates in buffet lines. Part of sneaky wellness and some of the ideas that we uncovered in our last event was the making sure that the things that we're offering, the healthiest options occur first in the buffet line. And that's part of behavioral economics. We by default, especially when we're hungry, we'll put what is first and attractive in the buffet line on our plates the most. So encouraging people to make the healthy options means putting those healthy options first in line, and having plates that are not, the size of Dallas, Texas every time somebody goes down the buffet line. The other thing that CSPI talks about is offering whole grains as part of the main meal options, offering condiments that are healthy condiments. So salsa and oil and salsa when you've got chips and things like that, or even as a condiment for burgers, etc. Oil and vinegar as an option for salads, not just our standard ranch and French. Offering low sodium options where possible, and then as we just talked about, offering a low fat vegetarian option as a protein. So those are the top 6 food guidelines that CSPI talks about. But we also want to take the opportunity to talk about how this dovetails nicely with some of the really exciting trends that we're seeing in meetings and F&B. And these are some trends, fascinatingly, that even things like Trend Hunter and some of the other really well-known trend organizations are starting to track. And one of my favorite ones, believe it or not, is Ancient Alchemy and Wellness incorporating that into our F&B. So this is where we're taking ancient herbs, ancient understanding of foods and their medicinal properties, and incorporating it into our F&B, and specifically many times into the drinks and the cocktails that we offer at events. So you might see this coming forward in things like matcha-based tea and different types of infusions in cocktails or mocktails at an event. Another great example is derivatives of the hot toddy, especially if you're in a cold destination. The key to these, and there's some really interesting websites out there that talk about alchemy-based drinks, but their goal is really to bring forward power plants as a main ingredient into our cocktails, mocktails, and food. So this is looking at things like the incorporation of ginger, which has long been known to be an anti-inflammatory, et cetera, or cacao beans as part of different cocktails, the acai berry as the mainstay in a particular cocktail. But even some lesser known alchemy-based and well-known wellness, I guess in wellness circles, opportunities such as using nettle seed or what was the other, pine pollen was the other really interesting one. They can also add really interesting and deeper flavors into the event as well. So I encourage you to go out and work with your chefs and work with your the properties that you have and kind of extend, find out what they're doing. There's a lot of great work going on even in the with the properties themselves of developing these types of things. And we kind of pull that forward as well. And one of the main things we're tracking is the opportunity to play with your food. We always tell kids not to do it, but the reality is we're all kind of kids at heart. And the more that we can, this is part of sneaky wellness as well, as much as we can help people incorporate their own experience or give them a new experience in creating the wellness food, the more likely they are to engage with it. So I'm going to give you about three or four different examples that we used here at the Incentive Research Foundation. And the first one is a couple of years ago, we did a ceviche station at one of our events. And a ceviche is a very healthy option for a lean protein, but not everybody's had ceviche, not everybody's interested in it. But we created a ceviche station where they had they could create their own ceviche, putting together different types of fish and different types of vegetables, and they could put them into a pineapple or a fresh coconut that had been carved out specifically for that purpose. And I can guarantee you the number of people who were engaging in that station were a lot more than the number of people that I knew really did have a heart for ceviche like I do. So the second idea is we had a food station where it was your basic salad station, you might say. However, instead of just putting the dressings out there, we had them hanging actually in syringes all around the outside. So you could kind of pull off one of the syringes and try a different salad dressing of all different healthy options. The final one that you see here is recently at one of our board meetings, we had a speaker come in who created some wellness cocktails for us, told us how he made them, involved us in the process, gave us the history behind it. Anytime you can incorporate a speaker in these types of things, the better. And there are some great people who have really deep expertise in this. And then the chef came out and taught us how to make and roll our own sushi. And it was just as yummy and fun as it was hilarious. I won't say that my sushi turned out brilliantly, but it was very, very tasty. And I know everybody really enjoyed the opportunity. Even people who I know for a fact weren't as drawn to normally eating sushi. So that kind of plays in as well to one of the other trends we're tracking, which is quality over quantity. You see a lot of properties now really focusing on locally grown foods and high quality foods that are produced in the area. And that gives you the opportunity to find ways to incorporate those into your F&B. So asking the properties that you're working with what they locally source, and then focusing on that quality versus just over mass quantities. A great example here was we incorporated a trail mix into one of our events recently. They had a lot of really great locally sourced items for trail mix that we could incorporate. And again, that kind of pulls in the ideas of being able to play with your food, but also having locally sourced and really quality-based food as part of the event. All right, so that was our focus on F&B, but that's only half the battle, right? We also need to be thinking about the activities at our events and how we overall design our events. So let's take a quick look at what we heard back from those 100 meeting planners. And when we started really assessing the standard meeting practices that were happening, and again, this is where more than 3/4 of our respondents said, yes, I absolutely incorporate these things standard or every time that I have the availability to into my meetings. And the first was providing a smoke-free facility. That's really not a hard thing to do here oftentimes in the US, but certainly when you're traveling abroad, it can be a little bit more tricky. About 64% of our respondents, almost 2/3, said providing a smoke-free facility is something they do standard. Free access to fitness was the second, with a little over 40% saying they provide free access to fitness facilities standard. That's easy in the number of places. It can be a little costly depending on where your location is. And we had about 40% also say they incorporate frequent breaks into their agenda. That sounds easy to do. I know for many of you out there, you have jam-packed schedules as your meetings are kind of skinnying up and we're getting less time to get done the objectives of the meeting. But we're going to talk about that in just a second and some things that we can do there to make those breaks super effective. About 1/3 said they incorporate casual dress standard in their meetings. That's easier to do in some industries than in others, but it is a great trick helping people do and some of the other activities we're asking them to engage in, to have healthy breaks, to walk around. It's much easier to do when you're dressed comfortably than when you are in more formal wear. And then we had about 20% that said, yep, we provide walkable venues as standard opportunity in our events. Again, the good news is that not 3, but actually 4 of the things that you see here are included as budget-friendly items. So smoke-free facilities, free access to fitness, frequent breaks, and casual dress are really low-budget ways that you can incorporate wellness into your events. And that's what we heard back, again, from those 100 very experienced planners. And it fits very well with the CSPI guidelines. What we heard in those CSPI guidelines is that one, here's the top 7 that they have. Announce that standing and stretching is fine. Again, this goes back into that trigger. Sometimes you want to get up and stretch, but sometimes we need that permission from our MC for the day or from whoever's guiding us through the event that, yes, if you need to get up, if you need to walk around and you've been in a long meeting, it is okay to stand and stretch when you need to. Incorporate comfortable clothes and incorporate people to wear shoes that are comfortable to support those activities. Have leaders facilitate short breaks, break up that sitting time with some interesting opportunities. For all day meetings, you see this happening more and more. Have yoga in the morning or some activity in the morning, and then do something during breaks during the day and have an activity then again at night. I'll talk about 6 here in a minute, but also adapting programs for physical abilities. I'm glad that they put this in here because it's so important that we know our audience. And then if we are doing stretch breaks or any other type of activity-based programming that we're considering, if those need to be adapted. And here's a great example of some of my favorite people. These are our staff. At one of our recent meetings, we did incorporate yoga balls as an opportunity in the room. We had standing desks that our attendees could go to. We also had, as you see there, those little pedals so people could sit and pedal while we were in the conversation. We had about, I think, 70 people in the room, but these also became really great conversation starters as well. It only takes a couple of people to get in there and start trying it. So I encourage you to work with your DMCs as well to see if you can find opportunities like this for your program. When we look at wellness practices over the past 24 months and what people had actually engaged in, we found some really interesting kind of, I would say, leading case opportunities. About concerned that they had selected a wellness destination, spa or health center. As Barbara mentioned at the beginning of the call, we've done the Meet Well events at the Stay Well Suites at MGM, which have about 17 different opportunities for wellness in the rooms themselves, including with the vitamin C infused showers. I can tell you, even at Palace Resorts, which I know is one of our sponsors today, they have fantastic fitness facilities and spa opportunities at their properties. We had a fifth of respondents who had said they incorporated non-traditional health activities in their meetings, and that can be everything from meditation to, which we actually did at Meet Well, Tai Chi, tapping, which is has a very calming effect in teaching people how to use tapping and those vibrations as a calming opportunity. So we had about a fifth of people who had said they had incorporated something like that. And about a third said that they had invited a wellness speaker in, and there's a lot of opportunity to do that as the number of people arises. Some of the best practices that we're seeing in terms of what's working, because we didn't want to hear from people and just give them what we thought the list of guidelines should be. We really wanted to hear not just what was happening and what was budget friendly, but what is really working for them. And one of the first things that we heard was organized activities. And I think that's great to hear. We certainly need to know that the organized activities are of interest. About, I think, half of our respondents said that the organized activities were working really well for them. And I have a really kind of interesting example of how those can also be a fun team building opportunity as well. We are actually going to be at one of the Palace Resorts for our event coming up. And Palace Resorts doesn't just do a morning run for individuals. If you want your group to do a morning run, they will actually have their staff dress up like zombies, and they'll have a morning zombie run, which fits very well with so many people I know who said, I'm only running if somebody's chasing me. But it was such an interesting twist on, how you can use the staff, for example, at an all-inclusive and create this kind of fun, different, organized activity in the morning. Yoga and meditation was something else that people said was working very well. Most resorts have, and most meeting space, I would say hotels that have meeting space and have organized fitness activities, have a yoga instructor on staff. Again, I know most Palace Resorts do. Key into that and ask if you can have them help your event. And the third, in terms of what is working, is healthy eating. Good to see that come up so high, but it also helps you establish, just to make a quick connection point, that healthy eating can also help us create a sense of place. I just came back from a tasting actually at a Palace Resort, and we're doing a lot of healthy options, but our chef actually helped walk us through the 4 different regions of Mexico and how all of the options that we were eating were connected to one of these 4 regions. So it's not just that we were eating healthy, some wonderful ceviches and some wonderful black bean stews, but it was connecting us to a sense of place as well, which kind of makes the impact even more powerful. Keep those breaks interesting. That's something else that we heard was working very well. And then a couple of other kind of edge case scenarios. One person came back and said, we do our wellness checks for our whole organization. We get people to do them while we're at face-to-face meetings, and that's such a brilliant idea. It's a core need for the organization, and you have people there, you have them face-to-face, and so they brought in their wellness checks, the group that does the wellness checkups for them, and did them there at the event. One of my other favorite one is somebody who said they incorporate puppies into their event, which I think is fantastic. I haven't yet incorporated puppies into events, but if I can figure out a way to do it, I definitely will be. When we asked people what wasn't working, and about 30% of the respondents came back and said, you know, we have had some things that weren't working. They said poorly attended activities, pushback on healthy food, and then either a guest speaker or non-traditional practice that hadn't fared well, and even reusable bottles, which sound like a great idea. Folks would use them once and then leave them in their room. And I think when I look across this list, what it reminds me of is that we have to be super mindful, not just creating the opportunity for our attendees, but we have to make sure that we're constantly providing the triggers for people to engage in those activities, that we're giving them the permission to do so, and we're structuring the events that they have the opportunity to take advantage of it. For example, if you're going to have a 6 a.m. yoga or you're going to have a 7 a.m. run, don't shut your activity down at midnight and the bar closes at midnight the night before. It's just human behavior, right? So we need to think about those things in the actual design of how we're executing a program. And so from poorly attended activities as well, part of that is also surveying and understanding what types of activities our group would like to be involved in. All right, so when you look at some of the trends, and we'll just go through these really quickly because I know we have a couple of other things we want to leave some time for Q&A here. One of the things that we're tracking is in wellness and design overall, are healthy fitness retreats themselves. Both properties and whole destinations are starting to focus their delivery on retreats and luxury wellness. And that can be incorporated into your incentive traveler meeting, keying into what the property Hello? Okay, hopefully we are back now. It looks like we lost audio there for just a second. Okay, can you all hear me again?
We can.
Okay, so I apologize, everybody. I love when technology goes according to plan, which is only about, I think, 50% of the time. So thank you for everybody who stayed in there with us. I believe we kind of lost each other back here. So let me just kind of back up and say Run Go was the app that I was talking about. Again, I apologize, we lost connectivity there. It's an app that you can use while you're out you can actually explore new destinations with it. It'll give you a path to explore a particular destination using the app. beta brands, both Gen Xers and Boomers alike are driving this leisure wear opportunity. So that gives us the opportunity to dress in business wear, but still be healthy. Mio is a sweat-proof cosmetic, because who doesn't want to look great when we're sweating? But you see this a lot being incorporated into the concept of wealth, and it is really driven by millennials as well, which is the concept of health is equivalent to wealth. So instead of being W-E-A-L-T-H, wealthy, people want to be wealthy. And I think that's going to become more and more prevalent in meetings as we progress. And I think my final one, and I will say that I've driven my team crazy with this particular trend, is the concept of hygge, which is this really fascinating, and the translation means, it's a Danish word, feeling cozy and contentment and well-being. So you think about a warm fire, a cup of cocoa, laughing with good friends. That's the concept of hygge, and there are whole websites dedicated to hygge. So it's a great concept that I'm starting to see fire pits, things like that are a great example on how we're incorporating things like fire pits more into both the build of properties as well as events. Kind of talks to that feeling of hygge that we're trying to get to. So some really, really great options there. I apologize that we lost a little bit of our audio there, but thank you for everybody who stuck in there with us. And I think we still got 10 minutes for questions. So why don't I turn it back over to Barbara to see what kind of questions we had.
Absolutely. Please, there's time for you to send in questions, so I encourage the audience to do so. I was watching the numbers. We didn't even lose anyone through the blip. So that's thank you, everyone. So I want to just encourage people to stay until the end, and I will be announcing in a couple of minutes. I do have the winner of the gift card, but I will just hold that for a while. Also, don't forget to download your free copy of our brand new hot off the presses white paper on integrating wellness into meetings and incentives, and that should be right on your dashboard. And if not, we're happy to send you a copy. We have your registration information. So Melissa, I want to ask you a couple of questions while I'm getting questions in from the audience that came out of the Meet Well in January of this year. And one was the idea of emotional wellness, not just physical wellness, and food and beverage and exercise. Diane Devitt, one of our speakers, did a great session on touch points throughout a meeting where you can integrate the message of wellness, and meeting design that can instill a sense of wellness. I'll give you some examples. We actually incorporated them into the events. This is for the audience. Well, obviously we started the day with yoga, but we had soft white seating rather than hard traditional rounds. It was very comfortable and casual. We actually put slippers, and people wore them at the start of the meeting. But obviously, it was a meeting about wellness, so I think they were very accommodating. Aromatherapy, we actually used it as an icebreaker. So we had people who were given a vial of a scent, and then a description of another scent, and they had to find their matching scent. And it was a wonderful way to kind of incorporate aromatherapy in a creative way. Using the color turquoise was another. What do you think? Do you think this is going to be more the role of the meeting planner to consider not only the food and not only the integrating exercise, but really the design of the meeting and how it could be less harsh and more accommodating and more welcoming?
More hygge? More hygge, my favorite word. And I think for many of the meeting planners out there, it really already is. I think most of us who are at all involved in this industry know that the senses are a big part of what makes all five senses, and how we engage them is what makes an event really, really memorable. If we're not just kind of taking the visual into consideration, but we're also taking, taste and sound and smell and, comfort and things like that. Yeah, I mean, I think it is, it's already in the role. And I think I think of wellness really as the opportunity for all of us to level up a little bit as we start to hear these things and just understand these things, and just become more familiar with what's generally available and the movement that's happening in the US, I would say in specific, about wellness, that it gives us an opportunity to think a little differently about our events. It kind of can be a touch point of innovation for what we're doing. So I might not have thought about alchemy as something that I would want to incorporate into my food, but what does that mean if I were going to do that? What would that kind of look like? So it can just take us down the path of having some really interesting thinking. And anytime we make events more accommodating to humans, the more engaging they're going to be. And I think there's just kind of a great example of that is this is talking about the development of a plant. This is a Walgreens manufacturing plant, and they had actually built it for individuals who had mental difficulties or physical challenges, but they wanted to involve them in the process of Walgreens shipping and logistics. And when they built the plant, they thought they were building it for that particular reason, but what they found is they just created a plant that was a lot better for humans in general, and it is now their most productive plant, and they've integrated those ideas into their plants nationwide. And I think that's really what wellness offers us, is the opportunity to think about all of our events a little bit differently, even if we don't incorporate everything, that can help us just create more innovative events overall. I love the aromatherapy, and yes, I would have worn the slippers.
I wore them the whole time. I think of wellness sometimes in the way that the green, that we spoke about green meetings many years ago. And at first it was we were being innovative by not using water bottles and paper and so forth. And now it's really a standard that we expect from our hotel partners. It's interesting, Tracy Stuckrath, one of our other speakers, suggested that people at the RFP stage ask the chef, what can you do for me? Here are my expectations. Here's my history. Here are the number of gluten-free people. Here are the number of, here's what I've done in the past. And use that to drive your decision about a property. Do you see us going that far with wellness over time, where it becomes standard and part of the procedure or the strategy from the beginning of stages of a meeting?
I'd say it's already starting down that path. I mean, if you think about it, many properties already have yoga as an option. Many properties already have actually healthy F&B menus. But here's the interesting thing. When you talk to the properties, in some of the hotel space, they're like, yeah, we create those wellness menus, and then people still order the burgers, right? So, or they order the non-healthy options. So, I think that it's definitely from a supplier partner standpoint that there are many properties that are already well down that path, and it can be a great differentiator. I think it'll completely depend on the group, but I do see over time hoteliers actually helping to drive a lot of that as well. I mean, you look at some of the things that MGM and their wellness suites are doing, and we mentioned some Palace Resort examples. I know when I was down at Ocean Reef Club, they had little gyms for use in every one of the rooms. So I think that hoteliers will drive this, and our supplier partners will drive this just as much as meeting planners do.
I did hear of one chain that was allowing their chefs to purchase all their meat locally. I mean, that's just one example. I just got a nice tip from Tony, one of our attendees, for the audience. You can negotiate a certain percentage of organic produce used for your meeting too. I didn't know that. So here's another example of working its way into our negotiating. Here's a question from Gina. I've never heard this before, but it's actually very smart. What would you say as far as wellness activities like yoga or meditation? Should you integrate them into the morning, or are they better later in the afternoon? Are people a little more still getting into the groove in the morning to participate where they might be more willing in the afternoon? What's your experience?
It actually depends on, well, I think there's two sides of that. What type of yoga that you're doing, honestly, and who your participants are. So I think there are a lot of things that can go into that. You could actually even do both. There's different types of yoga. There's a calming and de-stress type of yoga. There's an energizing type of yoga, and you could use them differently, honestly, depending on where they're placed within your program. And it would depend on the design of the program. So if you've had people out late the night before, don't anticipate them to show up smiling and wanting to do yoga at 6 a.m. in the morning. Maybe it's better left for the afternoon. The flip side is if you've had kind of an early end to the day before and then had a nice relaxing evening, maybe you start the next day with an energizing yoga. So I think it depends on the audience, the design of the program, and actually how experienced your yoga instructor is, that they could have different types of yoga that they offered.
So I have time for one more question, and then I will announce that winner, I promise. Age. Our audiences are, growing younger. Are you planning to do anything, or do you think it would be wise to do something where we analyze this not only as to what attendees are doing, but we break it down by age? I think sex, I'm very interested in male versus female activity and participation. It could be interesting. I only know my own observations, but is there anything out there or that breaks it down even further?
Well, I would say from an age standpoint, the wellness concept overall is being driven by multiple age groups. So Gen X, baby boomers, and above are driving it from the this isn't my term, it's somebody else's, but the fountain of youth perspective, like trying to maintain our health and I say our health, I'm definitely in those populations for a longer time. Millennials, again, we talked about that a little bit, and even them coming behind them, wellness and health is a core part of, creating that Instagrammable life, of having a healthy, having healthy opportunities out there. So I would say generationally it's being driven by now what types and how that plays into the types of activities. Certainly, you're not going to have super active Zumba if the majority of your attendees are 60 plus or 70 plus even. And, you're probably not going to have like a long, slow walk for, if your participants are in their early 20s. So yeah, I think it definitely depends on your audience, but I think meeting planners also know a little bit more. And I wouldn't say that, again, I get really nervous, and I don't think it's appropriate to say that, all millennials definitely want a certain type of activity, because we know that's not true either, right? It really depends on age and stage. I'm sorry, not just age, but age and kind of other things that are going on in people's lives that dictate what those types of interests are. There's an intersectionality that occurs. So I would be really, really hesitant to peg anything very heavily just to age.
Well, know your audience is really what you're saying, and I think that's pretty key. Unfortunately, our time is just about to end. I want to congratulate Dawn Halbert, the winner of the gift certificate, and we will be getting in touch with you. Melissa, I can't thank you enough. It's always a pleasure to work with you. The comments have rolled in about how helpful and wonderful the content was. So thank you for being a part of this. Thank you to the audience for giving us your time, and have a great rest of the afternoon.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.